Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined again this week by Ruairi Walsh. Ruairi, how are things?
Great, Mark. Yourself?
Great. Hopefully everyone's enjoying the nice summer sunshine that's out there at the moment in Ireland this week. I suppose this week, Ruairi, we'll review Leinster, Munster, round 5 concluded. We know our finalists in both Leinster and Munster. Some big stories coming out of Leinster. Munster, we see Limerick and Cork renewing rivalries again in 2 weeks' time in Park of Keeve. So we'll have reflections of Rory on that. If we do have time, we'll have a look at the under-20 hurling final, an eagerly anticipated one this side of the country in Galway against Clare. I suppose, Rory, let's get straight into it. Leinster, round 5. We expected a few fireworks when we were talking to Walter Walsh 2 weeks ago, but a stunning win for Dublin over Kilkenny. That marks the end of the season for Kilkenny. I suppose get your thoughts on this result, 126-22 points for Dublin.
Yeah, and it was the Leinster Championship that, had us in tender hooks right down to the end, which, the championship that wasn't talked up at all this season. All focus was on Munster. And, I think Neil O'Callaghan mentioned it afterwards in his interview. He tried to land a couple of blows for the Leinster Championship in terms of drama, I suppose, that we had in it. And that all happened from the first round when Offaly and Dublin drew. And I think that set us up then. That gave Offaly the chance to really hang in there. And that draw with Kilkenny as well, a dramatic last second draw there as well. And that, put Offaly in this position where if they could win their last game, they needed a favour from Dublin. And by God, did Dublin give them that favour with a huge performance up in Purnell Park. Look, a couple of years ago, this would have been a surprise, but I don't think it was a surprise. I was just saying to Mark off air beforehand that, in terms of form, this is no surprise. The only thing going for Kilkenny was his tradition and great record they have over Dublin, and particularly up in Dublin. Purnell Park since the round robin opened, and then when they've met them in Croke Park in Leinster finals, and even last year, just a big victory over Dublin, and they seem to have their number. But this Dublin team are, they have a real confidence, and it's not a fake confidence. It's a confidence they've earned over, performances they've put in. And they started the Leinster Championship slow. Particularly, I know they got the job done, you could say, down in Wexford, but they weren't overly impressive. But they've been slowly building, though, and improving. And we saw that last week against Galway. And then they gave their best performance, particularly second half yesterday. They definitely have more strings to their bow this year than they've ever had. I think the likes of Brian Hayes have really matured and come on another step, have become real leaders in the team. They have a subs bench now with Ronan Hayes making a big impact in the games, in particular, as he's come on. And that's something Dublin have lacked before, I think. When they looked to the bench before, they were kind of outdone by the bigger teams with kind of talent coming off it. But yesterday, Kilkenny were bringing on big names. Donnelly came in for Kilkenny in the second half. We're talking, actually came in 32 minutes just before the half time. Adrian Mullen came off the bench, Richie Reid, and you'd be thinking they're the big names that are going to see Kilkenny over the line, but got no score from the bench, Kilkenny, whereas Dublin had that impact off the bench. So look, their pace is troubling teams as well. And Dahi Burke is back to his best. We were a bit worried last year. He was below par post-operation, and but this year, he is back to his best. And just having that sharpshooter out the field, adds a dimension to your team. It draws defences out and creates space inside then. And interestingly enough, yesterday, Heatherton, we saw going a bit further out the field as well at times, and to great effect as well. And he had a mighty game yesterday. I kind of thought he was a one-dimensional player on the edge of the square, massive physique and a great paw. But he showed yesterday, he's real kind of wrists and some of the points he got, just swiveling and, over the shoulder, over the bar. I didn't think he had that in his repertoire. So he's definitely, he is a serious prospect for any team to handle, not just brute size and the aerial ability, but he has that kind of bit of finesse about him as well. So look, you have to say hats off to Dublin. I think they're going to be a real threat going forward in this championship. They have had Galway's number traditionally over the years. It's very hard to call that final. And whoever loses the final will be playing Clare now. And you give them every chance the way Clare are going, like this Jekyll and Hyde from Clare we've seen so far. Whereas Dublin have been a lot more consistent in particular. Galway have been a bit up and down as well, you could say. But I think they can build on last year. That's an All Ireland semi-final last year, and they're out to prove that was no fluke, and maybe give a lot better account of themselves when they do get to that stage, if they get there.
Yeah, absolutely, Rory. Some great points there. And I think for Dublin, this was a key fixture. The win in Salt Hill, you could critique all you want about the number of shots that they got off against Galway, But again, the impact of the late substitutes of Hetherington and also Hayes as well was quite significant. But I thought from start to finish here, and they've done this without Owen O'Donnell. They've done this without Liam Rush, particularly defensively, which we kind of called earlier in the year maybe would be an Achilles heel. The fact that Kilkenny didn't score a goal yesterday, I think for O'Callaghan, this is a great performance given the dominance that they had. I mean, Rory, like first half wise, they led 15 points to 11 with a breeze. Dublin hit 11 wides in that first half. I mean, it really did indicate the dominance, particularly in that middle third, that they were enjoying against Kilkenny. And really, they really put on the afterburners, particularly in that third, fourth quarter, to really put the game to bed. And Kilkenny really had no answer, did they?
Yeah, well, after half-time, Kilkenny kind of clawed things back. It was 17-18 at one stage. They had it back to a point, and that's when Dublin kicked on. And I mentioned, like, Kilkenny, I'm sure Ling thought, like, with the names he had in the bench, that would be the experience to get them over the line. As you mentioned, Dublin weren't at full strength. The fact that it was Dublin that, rallied, and they were the team, already through. Like, it does raise more and more question marks about where this Kilkenny team are going, like, but anyway, you can't take anything away from Dublin. Like, in the space of 12 months as well, just compare their Leinster Championship last year, where they were up and down at times and had that win over Galway and so on, but then hammered in the Leinster final, and then in the All Ireland semi-final after that massive win over Limerick, to then like concede 6 goals against Cork. Like, everyone was kind of wondering where exactly are they. But I think they're a much better team this year. They're a lot more solid. They've really come on, and I think O'Callaghan has identified where there were gaps in the team and possibly on the bench as well. And yeah, they are a lot stronger. My question mark going forward is, when they meet Munster teams, let's say teams that are goal hungry, like we know Clare at their best can be, like even yesterday they had Clare 3, bad and all as they were, they had 3 goal chances in the first 6-7 minutes, like that. Had they were taken, it could have given a different perspective to the game down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But look, they do create chances, and I think Dublin still haven't shown yet, because they haven't been put to the sword yet in terms of can they stop a 4-goal, 5-goal, because even in the league Division 1B final, they did look a bit open at times at the back, and that's the real question. Have they closed that? Because I don't think Kilkenny tested them in that way yesterday like they have in the past. And also, in Leinster, there was a lot of games where they weren't really tested. I know Galway opened them at times as well last week, and there was a bit of last-ditch defending and goal line clearances and so on. But that'd be my one question mark at Dublin. Will they if they can keep clean sheets going forward, I think they have a right chance. But can they do that? I have my doubts, but they're definitely vastly improved. I think they're a real threat. Leinster teams, I think the gap is kind of closing from what we've seen now, and it's still hard to judge, but I think Galway and Dublin are definitely improved sides than where they were last year.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there in terms of those two sides. I mean, what I do like about Dublin this year is they've added a few strings to the bow. Like, we know about their physicality throughout the pitch, dominant individuals, but again, it's the run game for me as well, Rory, that I think was the ultimate undoing for Kilkenny here. I think they just kind of broke Kilkenny's resistance, particularly in the end of that third quarter into the fourth quarter. There were some magical points after Donald Burke's penalty, and look, I don't think Kilkenny have any complaints in terms of the penalty concession. Again, it was more run game dominance here for Dublin. I mean, from a Dublin perspective, magnificent performance, 10 different scores. As you say, Donald Burke chipping in 111. He had one fantastic effort out the pitch, which was a real momentum changer, particularly in that opening half.
Yeah, from up under the stand, by the sideline, from his own 65, unbelievable score.
Absolutely.
That inspires teammates around, and it frightens Kilkenny because they know then they have to push out in them and create space then for the likes of Hetherington inside. Incidentally, Mark, we were talking about Kilkenny. Hugh Lawler, I think his loss was really felt yesterday because, like, Michael Carey is not a full-back, and we could see that yesterday when, just kind of Hetherington had that kind of yard or two, just that bit of movement, and Carey was, kind of on his heels and hadn't the time to recover. And, Michael Carey, very good wing-back, as we've seen in the past, and just so you're losing him from wing-back to cover a position that he's not comfortable in. And I think, as we've seen from teams, and I think Clare are no different, if you don't have your number 3 position sorted, like, on the biggest day against, when you're under pressure against top teams, like, you do get exposed. You could say that about Cork yesterday as well, and especially in the first few minutes, they looked in trouble at number 3. with Joyce out injured at the minute, and obviously he's going to be injured going forward. So that might be something that might rear its head again in the Munster final. But I just thought Kilkenny, like we've been speaking about them here for a couple of years, Mark, that they're in decline, and every now and again they come out and prove us wrong with a performance from nowhere. But they have been and it's just a lack of talent coming through. And like they have still been competitive at minor and under 20s and so on. But before you'd hear of Richie Hogan when he was 18, 19, there'd be talk of these prospects coming along, and like that hasn't been the case for a while in Kilkenny. And just from like knowledge in UL here, where you see a good few Kilkenny hurlers coming through, and they have had produced fine hurlers that have won Fitzgibbons in the last couple of years, but they all seem to be backs. Killian Doyle, who's burst onto Kilkenny senior team this year, I thought it had a fine season for, his first season in Kilkenny jersey. But like, where are these forwards coming through? And even it was telling yesterday, they had to go back to guys that were out of form. And if like Owen Cody 5 points, Cian Kenny 5 points, and then there was very little from the rest of Kilkenny forwards. So that has been their issue this year from the start of the season. And I kind of feel sorry for Derek Ling in a way that he came in after Brian Cody is a bit like the post-Man United after Alex Ferguson, but unlike those managers, he couldn't sign anyone. He's just had to play with the hand he was dealt, and unfortunately for him, like the conveyor belt was drying up as he took over. And particularly if you don't have forwards, of the caliber of what they had, it's very hard to win these games against top teams. And I think that's where they find themselves, and it's going to take, like, they're definitely going to bounce back, such as the strength of hurling in Kilkenny. But there's a bit of head scratching going on there, I'd say, and they're probably going to wonder what has happened, where they were producing like year on year. You had like even go back, just say Eddie Brennan and all these lads, and if you marked one, somebody else would pop up. Taggy Fogarty would pop up and score 1-4, and you couldn't, like, they had threats all over the place. And now you stop Cody. And in a way, Dublin limited them to 5 points. I'm sure they'd have taken that, considering he didn't stick in a couple of goals. And Cian Kenny 5 points. And then that they're not going to have enough scoring threat from the rest of the players. That is unfortunately where they are at the minute. And they cannot say they were unlucky this year. They could have easily lost to the Offaly as well. So, it was a huge shock that they didn't qualify looking at this from the start. But as the thing panned out, you could just see how far off the mark they are compared to previous Kilkenny teams. And they put themselves in a position where they had to go to Parnell Park and have to eke out a win. I think it was the Offaly game that did a mark, really. If they come out of Tullamore with a win, then they had Offaly and a head-to-head and so on. And the fact that was the performance, I think, that cost them qualifying. But to be honest, I don't think they would be going anywhere in All Ireland series. They are just, they're in transition, and they're, it's going to take a couple of years for them to come right. Like, they just need to find a few gems.
Look at Derek Ling and the management. I mean, Owen Murphy was on the sidelines for the start of the campaign, suddenly came back in around round 3. I do agree with you. I think Hugh Lawler was a massive, massive miss there in that full back line. Billy Ryan as well didn't commit this year. I think he was a very underrated player, particularly in the middle third for Kilkenny. Got through an amount of work. I suppose then you have the perfect storm in terms of Kilkenny then, in terms of the injuries. I mean, Jordan Malloy was unavailable for this fixture, out for the year. Then you have the likes of Tommy Walsh, wasn't able to really kind of feature. Adrian Mullen as well was struggling to get into fitness here. And I mean, I know Walter Walsh was on 2 weeks ago, said that he was impressing in club league. But again, it's a bit of a transition from club league into your inter-county. So as a result, Rory, it all kind of conspired. And maybe Rory as well, the head scratching and the retrospectives that will go on in Kilkenny, will they focus in on tactical setups here as well? Because it's something that we've remarked upon here, particularly the short passing game. They've had to evolve, but they are absolutely magnificent guys under a high ball, direct long. I thought they were basically chopping left hand out to satisfy the right hand here, to be honest. I mean, at times it really demanded for ball to be delivered quickly into the likes of Mossy Keown and TJ Reid. Didn't happen yesterday, and an awful lot of unforced errors again yesterday that Dublin did cough up in the middle third.
And you know what, Mark? Parnell Park is a tight pitch, and having a big target man inside does work in there. And as you said, sometimes just cut out the short passing in a tight pitch and go along. And maybe if Fionn Mackesy in at the edge of the square, I don't know what was his injury status yesterday, but he wasn't used. And just have him in there causing a bit of havoc. And you never know what breaks might come off it in goals, but just something like that, because TJ, as we know, he is very strong in the air. He just hasn't had that acceleration to kind of get away from guys like he used to be able to. But maybe if you'd have Mackesy, now saying that TJ is, in around the square breaking ball, he's so clever and so quick thinking that he'd be maybe if he was feeding off Mackesy inside there, someone like that. But I thought, look, they had to try something a bit different, and it didn't really happen for them. And that's maybe the one criticism you could throw at them tactically for yesterday. Like they didn't really change things up when things weren't going well for them. And yeah, look, it is a shock. And I think someone texted me earlier that the last time Tip and Kilkenny were both out at this stage of the championship so early was 2013, and we know what happened that year. But I'm clutching at straws here now. Anything at all I can cling on to. But it is unbelievable when you think about it. Two teams that hurled up an unbelievable Ireland semi-final last year, and both of them gone. So that's the way it is. And Munster, you could say, well, anyone could go, but nobody thought Leinster would be so competitive. So fair play to Offaly, for really upping the gears this year and shocking everyone with the level they were at. Like, yeah, you can only take your hat off to what Johnny Kelly and his management team have done, and the players as well. That it's one thing having a talented bunch underage, but being able to bring them through into senior. And we know physically, like, they've those young lads coming through, they aren't like the biggest guys, and they're still developing physically, like, for the demands of senior hurling. But he got the mix right then with the Dignans and Owen Cahills, the bigger men in around them as well. So I think as the championship went on, he had the bit of physicality in the forward line too, and I think it really benefited them. So they had shown that small bit of depth that you need as well to get through a round robin campaign. So they did the business yesterday in style, and I know Kildare shoved it up to them for a good bit, but there was only ever going to really be one winner there. And I think you see the difference in Kildare coming in their first year, and just by the time they get to round 5, round 6, things can get a bit ragged, like, and because the same players are used consistently all the time, and they don't have the bench that other teams have. And it often happens where teams, like, they put up good performances during the campaign, but the wheels can really come off in the last couple of rounds, and so what happened for them.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, fair play to Offaly. I think they've been the story of Leinster Championship this year. They've really made it very interesting, haven't they? And really, as you said at the start of this podcast episode, really set the stall out against Dublin, particularly in Tullamore. And look, to be fair to Offaly, I mean, the majority of the crowd there were Offaly. One or two work colleagues there from Offaly there. And look, it was a bit of a tetchy, maybe first 25, 30 minutes. Kildare were given as good as they got. Bourne, particularly in half-back, was literally marauding up the pitch. But I think it's the McCabe red card really has really kind of set this fixture up here for Offaly, really. It was a stupid foul here from McCabe, really, but it opened the floodgates here for Offaly. And I think Dignan certainly has been a very prolific figure for Offaly. I mean, Screeney has been out with injury. We wish Charlie Mitchell all the best. But again, Dignan, Owen Cahill as well has really taken opportunities as well. And that is a very formidable full forward line. When Adam Screeney was more coming out the pitch 40 yards out and really setting up great ball inside for the two guys inside.
Yeah, that's what impressed me. Like the clips we saw on RT yesterday, even with Screeney's like distribution, he gave some savage balls, and it just shows like he wasn't saying, because he has a reputation as a bit of a star factor about him. I need to get in the scoreboard here. He was just putting the ball to the guy in the best position, and it just shows a level of maturity about him. But yeah, look, I know as well, Mark, you were saying about the red card being a turning point, but McKenna gave way and made an awful mistake as well in the Kildare goal. Yeah. So both of those came like one after the other, which were a blunder. But let's not forget, only a couple of years ago, Kildare and Offaly had a few titanic tussles where there was nothing between the teams. And it just shows, how Offaly, like, having that bit of success at under 20 All Ireland, like the boost it gives to players and kind of, the upward trajectory they're on. So hats off to them. Like, and this wasn't a case where, they shocked a big team over one match to get through. Like they, as you said, they had two big performances against Dublin and Kilkenny, beat Wexford, did the business against Kildare, and the only game they lost in the Leinster Championship was up in Salthill against Galway. So, like, no one would have predicted that before the championship started, except for Offaly themselves, obviously. But yeah, look, massive boost for them. I just fear for them maybe in an All Ireland quarter final. I think they have done this has been their All Ireland now, qualifying, and that was their aim, to get top 3. They've achieved that, but they're going to be playing Limerick or Cork two really seasoned teams that, show no mercy and are, like just so used to this level. And for them at quarterfinals, it's another day out. Whereas for Offaly, it is the biggest game these lads will have played. Albeit, okay, All Ireland U20 final, but since then, and it's going to be a huge day for them. And look, I think once they give a good account to themselves, I think Johnny Kelly will be happy. I think get there, give a good account to yourselves, and have something to build on again for next year. Kind of like what Dublin have done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think they're in win-win territory now. Rory's certainly in that quarter-final pairing, either Limerick or Cork. Go in, express yourself, and look, they've had history with Cork in the past here, certainly. Joe McDonagh Cup winners a few years ago. I know it was a heavy loss, but they've built up rapidly here, Rory. And I think Leo O'Connor on a few weeks ago with us was really upping the whole Offaly senior setup this year. He expected great things, and so it proved, And that set of 6 forwards, particularly Dan Burke in midfield as well, chipped in with 4 points. I mean, Jerguinen as well, Keneally as well in the full backline, and Hoare as well in the goals. It's just, I think to be fair to Offaly, they're magnificent stick hurlers. They've always had that. But I think Johnny Kelly, particularly management, and the team have really kind of bought in here. And I think, look, in fairness to Kildare, tried as good as they want, but the 7-minute period between McCabe's red card and that Duignan goal really did break the back of this fixture. But again, I was very impressed by Offaly with the highlights I saw, particularly in the last 10-15 minutes. They strung some lovely scores together here, Rory. And again, it's due reward for Offaly. And, they're going to be set up nicely for a quarter-final. They're sitting back here and going to see a Titanic Munster final in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, look, it is, and they can sit back and kind of watch the Munster final and see what unfolds there. But look, I think it's going to be a colossal game for them. And as I said, look, I think they will be setting targets within themselves for that match. Definitely, like just as you said earlier, just trying to keep the goals out would be step number 1. But that's easier said than done, considering you've faced either Gillane or Brian Hayes and stuff. But look, we can't. That's down the line for them. That's 4 weeks away. I think they can. I think, judging by a couple of videos I sent, they were already out kind of enjoying the fact they've qualified. And look, in fairness, they deserve it. Well done to them. And look, it's throwing the cat amongst the pigeons in Leinster now, and it's showing that Offaly are going to be there for the next few years as well. This is a young team. Yeah. So if Wexford or Kilkenny are going to fight their way back in there, I think we're going to see a competitive Leinster Championship over the next 4 or 5 years.
Oh, absolutely, Rory. And I mean, Offaly, 8 different scores, Duignan and also Owen Cowell particularly, 117 in total. I mentioned about Dan Burke's 4-point haul as well. I thought was pivotal in various moments. I suppose looking at Kildare here, Rory, they've had some positive moments. The relegation to Joe McDonagh, I know it was touched upon in Sunday game. Is there an equitable system for Kildare, who are investing an awful lot of money in underage hurling throughout the county? And I mean, this time last year, they're on a cusp of a wave. Joe McDonagh Cup champions incoming. To have this now to go back to Joe McDonagh, is there an equitable way for a team to be kind of to survive here, or to kind of get some more extended exposure to the highest level of intercounty?
Yeah, I think Neil McDonagh mentioned last night maybe having a system where you have maybe 2 groups of 4, and I think that would work, right? If you have 8 teams in Leinster, and your top 2 in each group play Leinster semi-finals, the top 2 went to the final, and then the other 2 play off for the final 3rd spot. So your 3rd, 4th place playoff becomes a qualifier essentially, and then the bottom 4 teams go the other way, and they play semi-final. The 2 losing teams drop down and play each other for relegation. Yeah. That way, then you'll have 8 teams there, and you get relegated on merit, you qualify on merit, and you end up with minimum, still like a Munster Championship, you'd end up with minimum 4 games. Actually, between your semi-final and final, you have 5 games, which is what Leinster have at the minute. So you wouldn't be losing out in games, and there'll probably be a bit more drama when you get to have your semi-finals and so on at both ends of it. So that's something that they could look at, I think. So look, you do 6 teams this year, and you're looking probably Laois 7 and Carlow 8 at the minute. They'll be your top 8. Then below that, then you'll have your Antrims and so on fighting to kind of get up there, and Westmeath if they can get their act together. So look, it gives them a bit of hope as well, because they're that bit closer to with 8 teams up there to get into a Leinster Championship. Look, I think that might work. It'll give the likes of Kildare, if they're good enough, then they can't complain. If you're 8th and you're relegated, I don't think you can have any complaints. Yeah, that's one way forward maybe, and they don't lose out in any matches then either, the Leinster Council, if they're looking at it from a financial point of view.
No, I just think it's incredibly harsh for even Kildare. I think we've mentioned it before, like Carlow, Laois, Antrim going down. It's what are the parachutes here? What are the setup development plans here? Hopefully this hurling committee can really kind of focus in on this issue, because we want more up and coming teams. Case study is Offaly being able to stay in Leinster, have built over the last few years, and we see the reward that they're actually finishing up in third. So I think for the hurling committee, that's an imperative. The new GA president coming in is a good hurling man. So I think, to be fair to everybody concerned, now is the time to really kind of get together and really focus in on these developing counties. I suppose to finish off here, Rory, again, I was getting more WhatsApp messages in the first half from my Galway buddies, wondering what the hell was going on in Chadwick's Park. A good, strong performance opening half from Wexford, but credit to Galway, didn't buckle and ran out very deserving winners at the end. I suppose get your thoughts on this 320 to 231 win for Galway that sets up this nice clash against Dublin in the Leinster hurling final in a few weeks.
Yeah, when you look at if you didn't know the story of the game and you looked at the results, you think, oh, as expected, but that wasn't the full story, because Wexford raced into a 13-point lead in this game, and we saw this with Galway versus Kildare, the exact same 13 points. So Galway have this self-destruct button at times, but then they're also able to kind of rally and come back. But we know if they produce first halves like this from now on, they ain't clawing back 13 points against the Munster teams. So it's something they have to eradicate. I think it's this is the stereotype, I hope, but I think Galway have this kind of thing where there's a bit of a swagger about them at times, and they take their eye off the ball and lose a bit of focus. And you can't afford to do that. And probably took Wexford for granted a small bit based on Wexford's showing so far, and found themselves 13 points behind. But they have the talent, especially in the forward line, to claw back these big margins, and they've shown it for the second time in the championship. But look, I wouldn't put it past them happening again, because they have to show us that they're just a consistent team. You don't see more established teams doing this, where they just give themselves these massive deficits. And I know there's a breeze involved and everything, but there's no way the breeze was 13-point breeze yesterday. The Heat kind of put pay to any strong winds that were there. So look, they've got the job done, and a lot of people weren't really trusting Galway's league form and said, will they have changed during championship? They've definitely improved. We can't say they haven't. The new guys coming through, they've slotted straight in at senior level, and they physically look like senior hurlers as well. That's the thing, the likes of Neary and these lads, they look straight in there physique wise, and they are going to be, I think they're a threat as well. And whoever loses the Leinster final, I think Clare are going to have their work cut out. I know we're going to get on to Clare in a while, but Dublin and Galway both have the weapons to win a quarter final and progress to Ireland semi-final, which I'm sure when they kind of both realised a round or two ago that they were going to qualify from Leinster, that I'm sure they were targeting, they're already focusing towards All Ireland quarter final stage or semi-final stage and All Ireland series. So yeah, look, again, Micheál Donoghue, he's done a serious job, because I had serious doubts last year after the Tipperary game. We spoke about it here, what an abysmal performance it was. But to turn things around, and I'm sure he was probably looking at this in a 2-year plan. He knew he just couldn't turn things around in 12 months. But they seem to be definitely on the right track. But they really have to cut out these lulls they have, especially going forward if they want to stay in the championship from here on.
Yeah, it was again another worrying opening half, and all credit to Wexford. Did nothing really to play for, but came out of the blocks extremely fast. They were 13 points up after 25 minutes, and I think Galway's Achilles heel here is their middle third. Their in transition defence is nowhere near it at the moment. Dublin, Kildare exploited it. Dublin certainly did, with some direct ball in as well. But Jack O'Connor's goal, the Lee Chin goal as well, penalty. There's absolute chaos in that Galway full back line. Joshua Ryan gets the black card. Then Killian Byrne's third goal as well. The alarm bells were certainly ringing. But I suppose from a Galway perspective, the two guys I'm going to pick out here, Tom Monaghan, who was kind of outside the starting lineup, Rory Burke was going great guns, has had a hamstring injury, but Tom Monaghan has certainly picked up the pace and got his opportunity. He scored 6 points yesterday. But I thought Conor Cooney's role yesterday could not be underestimated. I mean, he came in, I think just his general experience, you could see the likes of Jason Rabbit, you could see Conor Whelan steady down a bit when Conor Cooney came in. I know Cooney scores the 1-8, but I thought was a very influential figure here, Rory. And I mean, for me, All O'Donoghue, it's a good reaction from the subs bench when you have guys like that coming on and rescuing the tie.
Yeah, it is. Look, and he has a bit of experience on the bench as well. He's a nice balance there. Look, I think there's probably a bit of is he 100% sure of his best team as well? Is there a factor of that too? Because different guys, he's used so many players and different lads have put their hands up at different times. That sometimes it can be a bit of a headache, as just having that right starting 15. Like, Limerick are pretty nailed on. Like, they might have 17 guys that Kiley is thinking he's picking 15 from. Galway is like just 24 guys that are kind of popping up there. So look, I'm sure different times during the year he's been writing out his best team and putting lines through guys and so on. So might be, look, sometimes that can be a good issue, a good problem to have, but I think most managers prefer to have their settled team in their heads. But yeah, look, credit to Galway. They've done the business, and it's going to be a very good Leinster final now as well. I think Galway feel like they owe Dublin one. Like, Dublin have turned them over so much recently, and they'll be hurting after that defeat up in Salthill. Dublin probably gone in here as favourites as well, which, they kind of like that underdog status, Dublin, I think. And so, yeah, there's a lot of expectations on him now. And Galway, haven't picked up a lot of Leinster titles either, like, over the years. I think when they joined Leinster, people thought themselves and Kilkenny were going to be, going toe-to-toe, but Kilkenny have dominated Leinster, like, and Galway have just been feeding off scraps. So here's another chance for them now to win a Leinster title. So, yeah, they really, I think they need to perform and give a performance for 70 minutes this time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a big reward for either Dublin or Galway. Winners getting into an All Ireland semi-final. But I mean, to be fair to Galway, again, 3 goals conceded. It is a worry for Galway, particularly talking to a few guys here who were colleagues that were at the match. Just that will not do moving forward. Even Dublin, with their potency, with John Hetherington, Ronan Hayes, again, Dublin only got 27 shots off against Galway and Salthill. I know the conditions were tricky, but I mean, from a Galway perspective, if you looked at video analysis, 27 shots from Dublin, you would have expected Galway to get the job done. So I think, that's a fascinating final, but I think definitely down the middle here, does Daithí Burke slot back into fullback and maybe put a Pádraig Mannion or even a Cathal Mannion back to that half back line, middle third, to really kind of start steadying the ship, because they have to stop leaking goals here. It was a very alarming opening half yesterday, for sure, Rory, for Galway. But again, composure-wise, they didn't panic, which would be the other thing. They got 112 from frees yesterday, which was a nice return here for the likes of Conor Cooney, particularly. But again, as you say, this is not going to cut it moving forward. So, I mean, it's going to be a fascinating final in Leinster in a few weeks. I suppose, Rory, we'll get on to Munster, and I suppose at the start of this campaign, we thought an awful lot of the fireworks would be saved for Munster, particularly in round 5, given the preview that we had a few weeks ago. But it was all a bit of a damp squib yesterday, Rory. I know you were down in Cork and Super Value Park of Keeve, hoping for a good Clare performance. And I think the neutral was looking for a Clare performance, really to kind of put the cat among the pigeons a little bit. And again, besides for the first 7-8 minutes, it was pretty much a stroll for Cork. I suppose get your thoughts on this 130 to 114 win for Cork against Clare.
It was a really, really worrying Clare performance, to be honest, Mark, because we saw this up in Ennis. It looked like they had solved the issues, but they all resurfaced again yesterday. It is, for me, there's 2 things going on. Like, without the ball, we set up yesterday man for man again, and the Clare backs do not have the pace to go man for man against a modern forward line at the minute. And I'm including not just Limerick and Cork, but Dublin and Galway as well. So against Tipperary, it seemed like it may have happened by accident now, but John Conlon was freed up and had an excellent game as a loose back, snuffing out dangers where it happened, being the second man on the scene. But yesterday, he, at 37 years of age, was given the task of marking the fastest forward in Ireland, Shane Barrett. Yeah. And he was just chasing. Cork, I'd say, could not believe the Clare setup. They could not believe it. And yeah, he 5 points from play, man of the match, Shane Barrett, and you can't fault Sean Cullen. What can he do? He can't match him for pace and just the space Cork were able to create. So without the ball, Clare defensively at sea again with their setup. With the ball, I just struggled to see what their game plan was. Were we trying to run through, running game, run at Cork? Were we trying to play through the lines, or were we going long? Because it was a complete chaotic approach to what we were doing. Because I don't think the players knew themselves what they were doing. Like for me as well, at times we Duggan and O'Donnell in the same line, and I don't think Clare can afford that because then you don't have ball winners in the half forward line. So if one is in, I think the other has to be out, and maybe chop and change them during the game. But even when we were hitting high ball into Duggan, there was nobody getting in support of him. None of the half forward line were, getting on the breaks. And then at the opposite end, when Cork were hitting the same ball into Brian Hayes, you had the half forward line racing through. Trying to pick up the pieces on breaks, and they did that very well, Cork. They were impressive, Cork, yesterday. Now, there's a small 1% here of me thinking that maybe Brian Lohan knows going forward, Clare do have to go sweeper, but he wasn't going to do it yesterday in Cork and give the Leinster opposition a chance to have a look at it. I don't know. That's what I'm hoping and praying, but I have serious doubts. I don't know. I think he's setting his ways a bit. This whole thing of from the 90s, man on man, you win your battle, and that's it. But hurling has changed so much that so much ball is in favour of the forwards. It's not like the 90s where it was 50-50 ball and every ball was a battle. It's not like that anymore. And some of the Clare guys like Ruairi Hayes for me is a really good hurler, right? Lovely touch. And so yesterday he came on for the injury-stricken Darragh Lohan, and I haven't heard how bad his injury was. We wish him well because I thought he had a great game against Tipperary and was just struggling a bit on Buckley yesterday with the quality of ball going in and the pace of Buckley. Like Rory Hayes come in, first 3 balls out in front, uses possession well, but the problem is he goes ball-headed for every single ball. So then when there's a ball he's not going to win, he's still trying to win it, gets turned by Buckley, goal for Cork, and it was game over. So look, it's something that the Clare backs have to realise, I think, that you're not going to win every ball and you have to set up defensively sometimes to keep your man outside and make him take a low percentage shot or whatever it is. Yeah, we're a bit too gung-ho at times, but you can maybe afford to do that if there's a sweeper there. But if there is no sweeper there and you're one-on-one exposed, you can't play like that. So look, I'm being heavily critical of Clare, but there was a big Clare crowd down there yesterday, Mark, and I was just waiting for something that we could shout about, but there was nothing to shout about, like nothing at all. And like we know the Cork supporters can be brash and they let you know about it when they beat you, but there wasn't even any reaction from Cork either. Like they couldn't even slag Clare fans yesterday because it was just so bad, like. So, yeah, that's my only consolation, Mark, is maybe we're keeping something in reserve and maybe Brian Lohan's looking at the age profile of the team and says we could do without a war in a Munster final against Limerick again and have 4 weeks to recover for a quarter-final and, that might be our best route forward. I'm hoping something like that is going on, but it didn't look like that. It looked like Clare were actually trying and they just were all over the place. That was my interpretation of it. Cork, they are slicker than they have been before. I think they're tougher as well. Like I found last year, and we spoke about this, kind of a bit of a bravado, a false bravado about Cork. Kind of we saw it during the league campaign last year, where there were kind of a lot of kind of off the ball, kind of where tough men and stuff. This year they're different. It's toughness on the ball and they're steely. It's kind of they're definitely. I think they're a lot more. There's a lot more speed about them this year. They're a lot more focus. And I think Buckley is a real find as well for the forwards. Like he offers them something different. They haven't had a kind of corner forward like him since Alan Cadigan, when he was at his best, just that small that it can turn a guy instantly, and he's fairly accurate as well. And then the half forward line as well. And that was without Darragh Fitzgibbon yesterday. And people said, "Oh, Clare are missing Ryan Taylor and Mark Rogers." Like Cork were missing Fitzgibbon, yesterday, Joyce and, Robbie O'Flynn. Like Cork were down bodies too. But yeah, look, it just shows Clare do need everyone. They do need their Ryan Taylor, who had a big game against. We just don't have it without him. There's a severe lack of energy in the middle third. David Fitzgerald, for me, he hasn't been in form for 2 years now. And I think maybe Lohan hoped maybe bring him down to a place he's played well in the past. Hopefully he'll recapture his form. That hasn't happened. So, look, there's a lot of soul searching for Clare. Positive we have 4 weeks to do it. On the other hand, Cork, I think, are going from strength to strength. And by God, is this going to be some Munster final? Like they are, two titans going to war here now. Will Fitzgibbon be back? I don't know. It's cutting it tight, isn't it, with a hamstring injury, 2 weeks? They didn't need him yesterday, but they might need everybody against Limerick. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. It's going to be a cauldron down there. And, sometimes it was, we say, familiarity breeds contempt. And, first, I suppose, Cork felt they had a score to settle after Limerick beat them in the league final. That reverses now after Limerick losing down in Cork the last day with the red card and everything else that happened. And, now it's really poised for an epic Munster final, and it's going to be a hard one to call. Fair play to Cork. They are getting stronger. They look the real threat again everywhere. The only concern, and we spoke about it, first few minutes, Clare had 3 high percentage goal chances. You had the one Ian Galvin kind of batted, came off the post, rolled along the end line. Jamie Cahalan lay down, sat down, danced on the ball, did the backstroke.
Like every good fullback should do, Rory, to be fair.
Yeah, Johnny Murphy threw it in as opposed to give it free in. Look, if you're a Cork fan, you're delighted it got away with it. But at that stage, Clare needed a goal because there was just that gap. It was getting to 8 points to 4, and a goal might have ignited the Clare crowd, done something, given a bit of a boost. Because the way we were set up at the back, we'd have had to score 5 goals yesterday, because we were going to concede massively. So maybe that's Lohan's gamble. He says we have goal scorers in there, we have talented forwards. We'll take a huge score in our defence and we'll outscore you at the other end. But that is a dangerous game to play because, you have an off day in front of their goals and scores Clare going to concede. Very hard to win matches.
I think with Clare, the fact that Brian Lohan didn't actually speak to the media afterwards spoke volumes. I think he was massively disappointed. I think in terms of the performance here, I think he might have thought they turned the corner, particularly against Tip. But as you say, these goal chances had to come in, really, Rory, to be honest. 6-7 minutes in, 2 of those goals have to go in to actually give this game a bit of an edge. And really, from then on, I think Cork's middle third really did kind of play their own tune here. Like Mark Coleman, superb again in that wing-back position. Again, I think Tommy O'Connell has been very underrated here. I think the amount of work he does here for Cork cannot be underestimated. Again, another solid outing from him. And then, look, you had Barrett, who was itching to get on the score sheet. Maybe there was 1 or 2 kind of critiques down in Cork about him in terms of his form. He answers them with 5 points. Likes of Connolly coming in with 11 points. He seems to be the established free taker. As you said, Buckley's been the right find, along with Walsh. And then, obviously, you have Brian Hayes inside, an absolute Colossus inside with the 1-2 and was withdrawn early. Precautionary, but again, game was well and truly up. Just had a dead feel to it. And I know I was in TUS Gaelic grounds, and I was hoping as yourself, Rory, to have a bit of a half-decent game to look at, but my word. I know Liam Cowell was very vocal on social medias and trolls and everything else, but I mean, this was just a one-sided affair. And look, Limerick shooting 17 wides, really. You don't get the sense of it in the match report that came in from RTE, but Limerick's dominance of this game cannot be underestimated, Rory. And I mean, scoring 27 to 25 points, Noel McGrath aside, I think this will be a very long winter for Tipperary, really, to recover from.
Yeah, and actually, just Mark, just before we go on to that game, just going back, you said Brian Lohan didn't speak to the media. It looked to me like he didn't speak to the players before the game either, because they were all over the place. Now, look, it's very hard to be critical of a guy like he won in Ireland with Clare in 2024, and in fairness, in the All Ireland series, got every call right from quarter-final in. And look, if it was done before, it can be done again, but there's no margin for error from now on. And for goodness sake, would somebody put in a 7th defender, please? But anyway, Limerick and Tip, isn't it mad how things can change so much in a year?
Yeah.
Like, coming off last year's All Ireland, Tip were so convincing in that second half. And even coming into the Munster Championship, I know they're heading in a different league, but you're thinking, Liam Cahill has, put the league aside and Tip are going to be ready for championship. And the warning signs were there in the first game against Cork. When Cork upped the ante in the second half, there was nothing from Tip. Then they had a performance, and let's not forget that Waterford game where Tip had the lead. Waterford shooting in the first half was all over the shop. Waterford had loads of shots, and Tips found themselves in a huge lead at half-time, which probably didn't deserve its time. And then there was the collapse, but then the recovery as well, because Tip could easily have lost the game, but edged ahead in injury time. To then the last two rounds have been really, really poor, like the two performances last week and this week. And look, there's been a lot of commentary online saying, oh, Tipperary were last year, they were the worst All Ireland champions. But like, let's not forget last year, like Tip got to completely dismantle Galway, got some unbelievable goals against Kilkenny, deserved that win, albeit with scoreboard malfunction and so on. And then in the Ireland final gave an unbelievable second half display. So it's revisionist now, just because this year didn't go well, to try and devalue what they did last year. But look, what they did do last year, I think, is they got the best out of their elder statesmen, John McGrath, Nolan McGrath, Ronan Maher. These boys had mighty years for them, particularly in the latter stages of the championship. But they didn't have that same spark this year, and they struggled like for form. And I just think the Tipperary forward line needs pace. Like, I know Stephen Tobin came in yesterday and he has added a bit of pace to the forward line, but they need more quick players. Like Darren McCarthy, a great year last year. He's lovely hands, lovely striker of the ball, but he's not blessed with pace. But you can get away with a Darren McCarthy if there's pace around him, creating space for him. But they don't have that at the minute, and I think that's what needs to be added to the team. So yeah, look, and I know there's a lot of criticism within Tipperary itself. And look, sometimes supporters, I'm probably being overly critical of Clare after the great things they did for us in 2024. But sometimes, like, supporters, like, it's only 1 year since they had all those happy moments up in Croke Park. You can't turn on the management and team that quickly. They're very quick to forget. And but at the same time as well, like, I think it's the manner of Tipperary's exit as well has brought that criticism, though. I don't think Tip fans would have been as critical if they had kind of fought on what they could say, like, fought to the end in games and stuff. But they kind of went out in a whimper last week in Thurles. And I know the red card did contribute to that, but they were already down 11 points, I think, when the red card came in. Yeah. They were in big trouble anyway. So I think that's really probably what's caused the criticism. But look, a lot of it is unfair too. They'll probably come back next year now and they'll have a massive chip on their shoulder going into the Munster Championship, will be completely written off. And the way Munster is, they'll be hoping to throw themselves in. And it looks like Cork and Limerick are going to be thereabouts again next year. I know we're talking about next year already, but like, there's no reason why Tip couldn't edge out a Clare or Waterford next year as well. Like, they've had massive talent coming through. We know from Harty Cups and under minors and under 20s. So there is the raw ingredients coming through, but to make them to senior hurlers now is the job ahead for Liam Cahill or whoever the management will be.
Absolutely. And look, I think, to be fair to Liam Cahill, there deserves at least another year, 2 years.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, God, after last year, I mean, the celebrations down in Tipperary last year after particularly the All Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny, one of the best games of the year, and then to dismantle Cork the way they did in the second half. As you said, people have an awful lot of short-term memories, but I think there will be an awful lot of soul-searching in Tipperary, for sure. I mean, the league didn't go according to plan, and maybe they kind of chased it a bit too much towards the latter end, a bit too little too late. But again, as you say, it's these last two performances particularly that have left a sour taste in the mouth. I think that the performance against Clare, I think Clare on the night in Thurles, where a team possessed, needed to get the result and certainly did. But this performance yesterday had all the hallmarks of a team that had unfortunately knew that they were gone. And I think some key moments in this game, like even after 17 seconds, what I was hoping for Tipperary was really to be very competitive, keeping the game within 40, 50 minutes and then kind of strike late. But again, after 17 seconds, giving Aaron Gillan 5 yard space, tucks the goal in. The second goal as well, Rory, I mean, it's a misguided 65, and I know Gillan is going up trying to flick the ball, but I mean, it's just a poor cold concession. And then when they got back to 4 points, the key incident for me then was the black card for Owen Connolly. I mean, anytime Limerick basically ran with any sort of pace in that middle third, Tipperary, the defensive unit just basically parted. And I think, to be fair to Limerick, there's an awful lot of scope for improvement here. They've scored 527, yes, but I think the wide count here, and I think John Kiley, was quick to kind of call it out in post-game. That's not going to be good enough moving forward. 17 wide, 6 or 8 in the first half, really did keep Tipperary in it. And I have to acknowledge Noel McGrath here, Rory. He was the one guy, literally, in his cameo. He looked to orchestrate. He looked to get guys involved. Some beautiful points from Noel McGrath. He got a standing ovation from the crowd with about 20-25 minutes left. An absolute warrior. But I mean, from a Tipperary perspective, it's just going to be level set, reset, come back again in October, November. and really start preparing here and trying to integrate a few of these under-20 guys that have won All Ireland medals, because they definitely need some fresh blood, definitely, after this performance yesterday.
Yeah, and they're not, I think they're a different position to Kilkenny. Like Tip have only recently won in All Ireland, and some of the younger guys have tasted victory already, and they have like been at All Ireland level been a lot more competitive, and minor and under 20. Like they've taken the ultimate crown on both those levels recently, and we're there again this year in the under 20 final in Munster, which, let's not forget, went to penalties. Like, so they could easily have been another All Ireland under 20 final. So they have the talent coming through. So like, it's not all doom and gloom for Tipperary by any means at all. And look, I know we didn't get a chance to speak on the previous weekend as well, but like we'd Waterford exiting the championship, but look, put up a big performance against Limerick, and just those 2 goals was the one, the kind of the one moment that kind of done them. And look, we had Aidan O'Connor dropping the hurley and so on, took a lot of media talk on it. And again, if there was a referee as an umpire, they might be looking, more inclined to look for these things, because all the big decisions happen in front of goals. And I just think it's baffling for the GAA that they still haven't thought about putting the referee at either end. And even I know Limerick people were talking about a bit of a shove on Mike Casey for the Waterford goal. Like, that's another thing like that. Like umpires can't call freeze. They can call the ref's attention to some incident that happened, but they can't. But if you had a referee in there, they could. That's mic'd up. I just think it's a trick the GAA are missing out on, and you could give the young and up and coming referees the linesman job, because look, for me, the line calls aren't the big ones. It's the incidents in around the goals, and sometimes that's where the referee needs help, because a ball in, he could be 80 yards away from the play, and he's guessing as to what's really going on inside, whereas an umpire is 20 yards away. So both those incidents could have been dealt with by having a experienced referee in as umpire.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, no, look, Waterford, I was at the game, and Limerick like shot the lights out first few minutes. Like, everything they hit went over the bar, and then Waterford had a period where they outscored Limerick 11 points to 1 in that first half. Granted, they had the breeze with them, and then like Limerick started hitting wides and started to feed into the team a bit, and looked like it was going to be an absolute grandstand finish. But that and the 60th minute, it just turned in that moment. And then last week as well, we had the Clare performance you mentioned down in Thurles, where produced a real high octane, heart in the sleeve performance, which had every Clare fan buoyant leaving Semple Stadium. And again, I think it was a night where Dermot Stritch kind of announced himself, and yesterday just had a poor game. Like, was started on Rob Downey, and a real experienced centre back, which I think was possibly a bad move as well. But look, he really came to life in Thurles, and Clare need him to recapture that form going forward as well. Yeah, look, it's all set up now. We've All Ireland series ahead of us, and before that, 2 big provincial finals. So yeah, it's going to be a few big weekends ahead, and hopefully hurling will get the spotlight it deserves for those weekends, because it's like, for all the talk about the GAA, you just feel with TV and so on, especially last weekend, having no live hurling match on telly, on live TV, all behind the paywall. Like, and I know it's been spoken about by the likes of John Milan and so on. I think he's spot on, to be fair, because hurling needs exposure, and it needs as much spotlight as it can, because we know it's a wonderful game, and sometimes just having this great sport and young lads not being able to see their county team, and their parents mightn't be into hurling that they're going to pay for the match for them, like, or it might be just something that they'll do. So yeah, I think when we're competing for the attention of young players with soccer and rugby and so on, and Gaelic football and other parts as well, and I know it's all in the GAA umbrella, Gaelic football and hurling, but in certain parts of the country, hurling's really trying to take off, and the GAA are doing it no favours, I think.
I mean, we do have a GAA president turnover at the end of the year as well, so let's see how that emerges. But yeah, no, I think some fair points there. And I mean, look, before we end, like, Limerick reaching their 8th consecutive Munster hurling senior final as well. It's a magnificent achievement. I know Jim Fioric, the US Ryder Cup captain, was there with JP McManus yesterday, all of these players as well. But I mean, look, to be fair to Limerick, it's a magnificent achievement of this group of men, John Kiley, Paul Kinnerk, the backroom staff, county board, to get this team into position again. So look, I think that's going to be an absolutely riveting final in 2 weeks' time. I suppose before we go here, Rory, quickly on to Joe McDonagh. I mean, things are pretty much settled in terms of the finalists, but look, some noteworthy performances. Laois go to Ruislip, get the job done against London. Unfortunately, London get relegated into the Christie Ring. Carlow under strength, go to Antrim. Antrim produced the best performance of the season, I think. Also down, I think, have been the highlight of the Joe McDonagh for me. Again, Ronan Sheehan has done an incredible job there. And again, beating, I think Westmeath for me have been a massive disappointment this year on Joe McDonagh. After last year's critique of management, the team haven't really picked up this year. I suppose get your thoughts here on Carlow Laois final and any other thoughts here in terms of the final round.
Yeah, no, the two best teams are in the final. They were kind of way ahead of the pack, weren't they, in one way? And it's all set for, like, it's going to be a hard one to call. Laois probably were slight favourites got into Joe McDonagh, but Carlow turned them over very early in the competition. And I just, looking forward to it. It's going to be a tough one. They're neighbours, rivals, and they have met many times in Joe McDonagh at this level, but I don't think they've been too many finals against each other, though.
No.
So in a way, it is a novel pairing and it isn't a novel pairing because they've met each other so often, but at this stage of it, maybe not. I just couldn't, at the minute, I couldn't call. You'd have to wait and see because, the one thing about Joe McDonagh teams is they're relying on certain marquee players. Your Chris Nolan with Carlow, Podgelini with Laois, and you just want to see that these guys are fit and, starting before you make any calls on who'll win this match, because it's, as I said, it's probably the tightest one to predict of any. Like, you make a better fist of predicting the Munster-Leinster finals than the Joe McDonagh one, I think.
To be fair to Carlow, really the rest of quite a few of their marquee players to Antrim. But, Antrim have finished the season very strongly after the mini-season crisis that they had, for sure. And I suppose Davy fits the parts Antrim here. Antrim gone 3 wins in a trot, but again, key losses here against Down and also Laois scuppered any chances of them getting into Joe McDonagh. But I suppose for Antrim, it'll be an interesting period here to see who they actually will appoint moving forward.
Yeah, look, you couldn't claim that the 2 years were a success. Like, they got relegated last year and were expected to bounce back this year, or at least get to the final. With that not happening, I think as well, now this is not Davy's fault, but he does attract kind of a media spotlight to the team, and maybe it doesn't help the team, having almost a negativity kind of surrounding them, and definitely kind of an overexposure compared to other Joe McDonagh teams, and every thing that happens, and there's a bit of a pressure on them then to perform because of who their manager is and so on. Just an added pressure. I know it's pressure on every team to perform, but just an added pressure with Davy there, I feel. But you couldn't say that they improved over 2 years. And look, that could be down to lack of personnel. I'm not, as tuned in to what Antrim have coming through and so on. I do know that down in Fela last year, Dunloy were an excellent team, so that's a good sign for underage hurling if they have a club team at that level. But I don't know, what's their talent like. They don't seem to be, since they've gone into Leinster and under 20 and minor, they're in tier 2, tier 3, and they don't seem to be breaking into the tier 1. Even Westmeath this year won 3 games and beat Kilkenny possibly, I think. But due to the way the system was, even though they had 3 wins, 1 defeat, they were knocked out because they were coming from a lower tier. But they have been competitive this year. I think it was at minor level, whereas Antrim haven't figured it all. So I think that is a big worry for Antrim going forward.
Be interesting times there, particularly with the players on the board as well, because there hasn't been that haven't been on message for good parts of the season there for sure. We'll look forward to the Carlow Laois game in due course anyway. But and I suppose before we leave here, Rory, there's a small matter of an All Ireland under 20 final. Local neighbours Galway and Clare at it this weekend. I suppose get your thoughts on this. It's going to be a cracking match.
Yeah, this is a repeat of the minor final 3 years ago, when Clare kind of, I think, won by 7 or 8 points in the end when they weren't expected to. This is the Galway team that's been talked up a lot since they were under 14s with, Rabbit and Aaron Nyland. They really made hard work of the Kilkenny game. But in the end, Galway, they have that scoring power up front and, got there, and I think they're there on merit. And we, in the Munster final, we had a cracking game between Clare and Tipperary. Went down to penalties. Mark Sheedy, the hero on the night, with 3 penalty saves, made it onto ESPN #1.
Certainly did.
So let's hope he doesn't have to do that this week, that it doesn't have to go to penalties and Clare can get the business done in 60 minutes. Because, again, I actually thought the 20s gave the senior team a boost when they needed it, because they went down to Cork, Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and produced an unbelievable performance below against Cork to win the semi-final. And even Lohan mentioned that the seniors did feed off it and they spoke about it, and that the energy that 20 team brought and the belief they brought. So I think the senior team were needed another boost, and hopefully they can provide it. But this is going to be another hard one to call. Galway, if Galway possibly took them took their eye off Clare and were a bit overconfident at a minor level. They know not to be now, and we know from the strength of the underage championships in Munster that the Munster champions seem to go on and win a lot of these finals at minor and at under 20 levels. So even though Galway have looked really good, were they up against the same strength of opposition that Clare have been up against? And so it's 2:00 Sunday in Thurles. I think our good friends TG Cahir are showing it live for those that can't make it. I want to be down there, and there is talk that the All Ireland quarter final, Clare and Limerick minor, might be a curtain raiser, which would be great if that happens as well.
Oh, hopefully.
So, I'm going to be I'm going to give Clare the shout here, just on the fact that they've been improving as it's been getting to the latter stages. As I said, they were excellent against Cork. Thought they were really good against Tip. Robert Loftus at full back, really solid out. Hegarty at wing forward, coming back, scoring from distance at times. Something a bit like we spoke of Donald Burke earlier, having the ability to score from back around your own half back line at times means that you're dragging opposition players out with you and creating space inside for the lads inside. So yeah, look, I'm going to give Clare the nod, but a tentative one because, like I said, Galway have serious threats up front.
No, absolutely. No, I think it's a fascinating game. And I mean, to be fair to Galway under 20s, I think they have been the marquee side in this provincial championship in Leinster now. They nearly got caught rotten against Wexford. And all credit to the Wexford under 20s for putting up a good challenge in the semi-final. And it certainly stood to Galway. Thought they were, in fairness to Galway, thought they were a bit more better than Kilkenny, but particularly in that final stretch, final quarter, they really did blow Kilkenny away. Very impressed by Cullen Killeen, also Michael Burke, also Vince Morgan as well, chipping in with that huge goal as well. Jack Shaughnessy as well, 1-7. Brian Callahan, Kieran Lean. They've an awful lot of good outside shooters as well here, Rory, that Clare will have to do due diligence on. But I mean, Clare under 20, if you can't go into an All-Ireland hurling final with the confidence after that epic game against Tipperary, nothing can. And I mean, the resilience here to kind of pick themselves off the floor once or twice during that was quite key here, Rory. And I probably go with you here. I think Clare just shading it. But again, Ireland is going to be a key component here. He didn't start for Galway against Wexford last weekend in Chadwick Park. There is a bit of a doubt about him. So if that was the case, I think I would give this to Clare. But again, hopefully hopefully the weather continues here, Rory, because if it does, then this will be an absolutely sensational fixture anyway. I suppose we'll leave it there, Rory. Been a lengthy one tonight. Many thanks for your time. Again, look, Clare going in as the third team in Munster. That mightn't be all too bad, Rory. Lightning could strike twice there last year. No, Tipperary did build it up, so I wouldn't be losing too much hope. But I suppose next week, Rory, we'll have a look at the All-Ireland Under-20 final between Galway and Clare. Some bragging rights here in the west coast of Ireland. I suppose after that then we'll have a look ahead to these provincial finals and also to the minors as well, because we're getting quite close here to the business end of that. I suppose until then, Rory, many thanks for your time. Have a great weekend and we'll chat next week.
Thank you, Mark. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.